Rage, meanwhile, this morning over comments from Veterans Affairs Secretary Robert McDonald comparing wait times at VA hospitals to the time that people wait for rides at Disneyland. Listen.
What really counts is how does the veteran feel about their encounter with the VA. When you go to Disney, do they measure the number of hours you wait in line, or the number, what's important? What's important is what's your satisfaction with the experience.
Wow. House Speaker Paul Ryan responding to the comments almost immediately. He tweeted, quote, "This is not make-believe, Mr. Secretary. Veterans have died waiting in those lines." Joining us right now is former Navy SEAL and Donald Trump supporter Carl Higbie. Carl, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for your great service to this country. What's your reaction to these comments?
The fact that the Secretary of the VA, the former CEO of Procter & Gamble, a private sector monster, would fall into this wormhole of D.C. and screw this up that bad. It's disgusting. I mean, look, you have him comparing this to an entertainment center. The VA is not an entertainment center. I have friends who are on these waiting lists. I have friends of fathers of friends who have died waiting for this. This is disgusting.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, knowing that people have actually died waiting, to compare it to Disneyland.
Well, I mean,
that's why it's sparking such outrage.
These waiting lists are just a perpetual thing. I mean, at least the TSA just fired somebody over it. But the fact of the matter is these waiting lists are all over the bureaucratic system. It's time to start getting things in order. I don't know why they can't do it.
That guy at the TSA got fired because it was disclosed that he got a $90,000 bonus on top of it. I don't believe for a second that he would have been fired if the TSA and the management there hadn't been embarrassed to that point. But I don't understand how you even come up with this analogy, how he could think. Maybe because Disney, people choose to go to Disney. These are people who serve this country.
Also, people don't like waiting on those lines, even at Disney, and their lines.
And you can pay extra to get out of the lines, too.
Yeah, the irony is
but they're not sick waiting on lines. People are sick and dying waiting for the VA.
Carl, what's been your experience? Have you dealt with the VA? What's been your experience there?
So as a veteran, I went into the VA. I got my initial health screening when I got out, and it was a disaster. It took 2.5 years for me to actually get the first initial health screening. It was unbelievable. I have private health insurance. You could not pay me to go to the VA. So I live in Connecticut, the one in West Haven or whatever. Absolute disaster.
So you don't even use the services?
No, absolutely not.
Mark, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say the VA could actually learn a lot from Disney about line waiting, about how to manage logistics. He could turn to the private sector for solutions because he clearly does not have it within the government.
Right. And Disney does measure how long people wait in their lines. They spend a lot of time worrying about that.
Because that's part of the experience.
Yeah.
So at the VA, they're not recognizing that is part of the experience of the VA.
100%. And what private hospital do people die on waiting lists? I mean, it doesn't happen. Let's get somebody in there who actually knows what they're talking about. Like McDonald was, he was an Army captain. He's leaving his own men behind here. It's disgusting.
So what do you do in terms? You're going to private hospitals. You're going to private doctors. You won't even.
I won't even bother. I go in there, and when I was getting my initial screening, I had 8, 9 appointments that, half of them didn't show up for. I had to come back the next day because it was such a long wait. And you've got guys that, sure, some of the Vietnam-era guys are very happy with the system because they've been in there, and getting into the system's the hard part, but getting the service, I mean, these guys, they bring a newspaper, they wait 6, 7 hours, and they hang out, they get their appointment, they go home.
And why? What do you think is the biggest problem?
I think it's just a lack of accountability in all government agencies.
Isn't it the culture of this administration, though? I mean, you experienced that yourself, right? You shared that in your book. It's this PC culture. It's America Last philosophy. Doesn't it come from the top down in this administration?
Exactly. But again, there's no accountability. Like there is, you look around, people are token and joking on their computers, things like that. People don't care at the VA. Now, there are a lot of people who do care, but for the large part, the people at the VA just are not incentivized to do better. They don't get paid more. They don't get bonuses unless you're way up high, and they get a bonus anyway.
But Kelly got that bonus, right?
Can we talk for a second about Fallujah? There's this major advance going on around Fallujah right now. Is there any prospect for settling that region down and for taking the city back right now?
Well, I mean, are the resources that we're arming over there that we're supporting are stretched so thin? Not to mention, I don't think they have the actual drive to take it back. And also, what are they taking back? Fallujah has been riddled not only by us coming in there in 2004, but the entire war, and now ISIS has completely ransacked the thing. We're taking back a pile of bricks. Like, does it really
And how about
matter?
Valerie Jarrett bragging about the end of 2 wars? Did you hear that over the weekend?
Yeah, well, here's the problem with it. Everybody's saying, oh, Obama ended the war in Iraq. And guess what? The enemy gets a say on whether or not the war is over. they're saying, no, it's not over. So we now need to go back in there. And look, everybody said, you got to go back in there. You got to keep boots long term.
So you were in Fallujah.
Yep.
What has been, I mean, this was one of the first cities that ISIS took down.
Yeah. So here's the problem is you have a number of vets like myself who have given everything they had to get to take these cities back and to hold this country's line for their sake. I mean, we didn't get anything. We weren't compensated with resources there, I think, which is a big fault. But you know, we've had this huge fight for the longest war in America's history, and now we just pulled out and let it go, and now we're committing resources, and we just had Charles Keating get killed over there, a SEAL, and when are we going to decide whether we're actually at war or not? And when you do decide, commit the necessary resources, no matter how unpopular it is.
Will Donald Trump do that? He sounds like he's got pretty mixed views about how engaged he wants to be in
Well, he basically said he is going to declare war on terrorism if he is elected.
We've been in a war on terrorism.
Yeah, but what Carl is saying is that we have to decide if, in fact, we are at war.
Here's what you do. You draw that line. You say, look, are we at war? Are we not at war? Define the goal. If you ask any commander right now in the U.S. military, what is the desired end result in the war in Iraq and Afghanistan? They'd be like, well, you know, regional stability. Well, define that. You cannot define whatever the mythical goal is here. Define the goal and then commit the necessary resources. 250,000 troops, air support, massive raids. Discuss, not saying do it, but discuss the threshold for a nuclear strike.
He's also said, though, he doesn't want America to be the world's policeman.
Right.
So that kind of, you know, he waffles a little bit on where he sees America's role on the world stage.
The administration has stripped down our defenses, right? Has cut the budgets for defense. At the same time, has had this feckless strategy, really no strategy at all, you know, overseas in these wars.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got.
What if it's an intentional strategy, though? The vacuum they've created is the strategy. Sadly.
Right.
I mean, we are exactly where the Obama administration wants us to be.
And what did she say this weekend, Valerie Jarrett?
She's citing Valerie Jarrett. I think it was on 60 Minutes, citing President Obama's accomplishments, the ending of two wars.
The ending of two wars, right? So that's why Trump is definitively saying, I will build up our defenses, I will take care of our veterans, right? He obviously has got some answers to the question on the ISIS strategy.
What do we do?
The problem is, too, you have an electorate that chose not to serve, which is perfectly their right. 98% of America chose not to serve, but they're electing the leaders that are governing those who chose to serve. And they're doing it in a PC manner, and it's not effective to winning the war. You have to kill bad guys if you want to win a war. I'm sorry.
Really important conversation, Carl. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Carl Higbie is the author of the book, Enemies, Foreign and Domestic, A SEAL's Story. Carl Higbie.